Hello guys, Termex here, back with another Throne and Liberty video. Now if you've been following along on my two previous videos, I made a gear guide for the Crossbow Dagger, a build guide for the Crossbow Dagger, but today we're going over the skills specializations, the masteries, all the sorts when it comes down to those things, because if I were going to make one video with all this information, it would be a 30+ minute video, and a lot of people just don't really want to sit through that. So I decided to take the route of making 3 digestible videos based on what you guys are personally looking for. So if you're looking for the other 2 things, check out my channel. If you're worried about the skills, the specializations, the best and worst ones, then stick around because we're going over that right now. First thing I will get out of the way is going to be the mastery, because that's probably the most commonly asked question when it comes to my weapons. And universally for the crossbow and the dagger, I recommend going for the bottom tree, just because the top tree for regen on the crossbow is literally just for health regen, cooldown speed, mana efficiency, nothing really too amazing in my opinion. And you go over into the move, I would actually put this as your second best and the second one that I would go for, because over into the move in the second you have hit chance, mana cost efficiency, magic defense, ranged hit chance, all this stuff, plus you get movement speed increase, which is absolutely insane. But my personal recommendation for crossbow is the bottom. You get base damage, skill damage boost, offhand activation rate, base damage, buff duration, cooldown speed, attack speed, and you finally get just range damage dealt at the very end. And if you're wanting to do the most damage early, 100% go for the bottom first, and then I would recommend go for the middle second, because the middle is amazing. Don't even touch the top when it comes to crossbow. Movement speed is actually a really huge thing with this build, and getting the most movement speed possible. You're going to be able to kite people a lot easier in PvP. You're going to be able to dodge a lot of PvE mechanics without the need of using an ability, when of course you already have a dodge ability and 2 dash abilities, so that's not really an issue as well. Over into the dagger mastery is kind of the same thing. The disguise will give you more range defense, all that kind of fun stuff, and this I would recommend for more survivability. Going over into the poison. The poison I don't really like too much. I know it gives cooldown speed and all that stuff, but it doesn't really have anything that really helps poison if you look through all of these. It's just silence, weaken, and all that. But the assassination is what gives you the base damage, gives you the offhand activation rate, critical damage, and then the final capstone is just raw attack speed, which is amazing. But I would argue, based on what you're doing, you could definitely go for disguise first if you want to be more tanky with your build, as this will increase just range defense, stuff like that. But do not use the middle one when it comes to the daggers, unless you're running daggers mainly, and if you're doing that, you're probably using the crossbow combo wrong. Now over into the skill specializations, we're going to go over into the dagger first. Now the main things you want to be using on dagger when it comes to the crossbow build is going to be shadow strike, inject venom, maybe ankle strike, camouflage cloak, and then phantom smokescreen, maybe fatal stigma if you're going to be doing PvP 1v1s, but outside of that, this is kind of a useless ability. So first one, shadow strike. I would recommend the skill distance increase and the bind duration. Shadow escape I would actually kind of recommend if it's more of your playstyle. This allows you to dash to the target, chain them, recast, and then go back to where you chain them. But I like to use this as something to get through bosses. So in certain mechanics in dungeons, and the boss is going to do like an AoE or a cone ability, if I click this, I instantly teleport behind the boss, which is something I personally love doing, and it just makes it a whole lot more maneuverable of a build. But having more range allows you to cast this from a safer distance, but also allows you to go onto people running away from a longer distance, because if people are running away from you and you could cast it from farther away, you could teleport to them and then they can't move for 3+ seconds. Inject venom, obviously you want longer poison duration for the passives in the dagger tree to take more effect. For example, there's a dagger passive to where when a target has a poison proc, there's an 80% chance that their defense is reduced with your attacks, and having poison up as long as possible will increase the chance of that happening. Cooldown is okay if you could spare the points, but I would actually go into mana cost over cooldown, just because mana towards the end game with this class can be very costly. I also brought up ankle strike. I have it upgraded to a blue because it is a pretty cool ability in PvP, but I'm gonna say right now in PvE this thing is absolutely useless and not needed at all. It's just a waste of a DPS slot. But if you're playing group PvP and you have a sword and board on your side or a great sword, there's really no reason for you to be running this. Even if it's a wrath attack, there's really no point to run this unless it's small scale, like 3v3s, 1v1, or things along that nature. And if you're going to do that, I would actually go over to expand conditions because it's guaranteed to knock the target prone and it will just last a very long time. Camouflage Cloak, your most important ability in the entire game. Get the duration increase and the bonus CC immunity. The CC immunity allows you to be immune to weak, stun, petrification, sleep, silence, terror, bind, all the above for 3 seconds, and it's just absolutely insane. Plus the duration with the invisibility. The more you upgrade the invisibility, the longer it is, and adding 2 more seconds is pretty good. You could also argue the cooldown reduction is kind of useful, but it's already a minute long cooldown. Taking off not even 10 seconds isn't really going to do much. And then Phantom Smokescreen, this is something that you could use in group play or personal play for evasion. I would recommend both of these because you would always evade melee projectiles and it would last 1 second longer. It only lasts 3 seconds, so allowing it to last 4 seconds would make it pretty damn powerful, but only run this if you're not going to be running any of the bow ones. So somebody followed while recording. All right, Harry, I appreciate you. But by that I mean, if you look into your skills, all this row is your quote-unquote ultimate abilities, and you should have one of these in your kit. I personally prefer Wind Snatcher, but we're going to get into that. Now for Quickfire, you definitely need the Chain Fire because it increases the attack count to 4, and then over here, damage increase, you get 20% more damage, but the cooldown is longer. But the thing about this is you do so much more damage and the cooldown is basically not even that big of a deal because over into Nimble Leap, it says right here, cooldown reset, resets the cooldown of Quickfire. Now this does cost 10, which is kind of spendy, but that allows great synergy because you could also do consecutive use and get 2 charges of Nimble Leap. Now Whirlpool attribute, where you get the little thing, it's okay, but it's not really all that great. It's just a little bit of movement speed that you're not going to use. If you're dashing away from something, why would you stay into the circle that it provides for you if you're trying to get away? You know what I mean? It's kind of counterintuitive. Immune, I would actually get this if you are a pro gamer or have the extra points to spend, because you could actually use this to dodge boss mechanics if you time it perfectly, like perfect. It's not an iframe, but it does give you partial immunity to crowd control, which is absolutely insane. If you time a sleep bomb in PvP, you will just completely avoid it and you're able to go invisible, do what you need to do. Detonation Mark is actually called Original Mark, Mortal Mark. The difference between Mortal and Detonation is that bonus 19% isn't going to be taken from all different users. So instead of them taking 20% bonus base damage, what actually happens is you get rid of that and you improve upon the accumulated damage that Mark does provide. So when you mark an enemy for 3 seconds, whatever damage they take traditionally, 10% of that will deal a big explosion within that 3 seconds. So if, let's say, normal mark, you do 1,000 damage, you're only going to do 100 damage on the explosion. Detonation mark, you do 1,000 damage, you're going to do 400 damage on the explosion, and so on and so forth. And obviously, we're doing a lot more damage than that if we use certain abilities. Definitely a needed one in my personal opinion. Chain mark is kind of cool for PvE, and stamina stagnation is kind of good for PvP. Not things I would recommend over prioritizing detonation. Recoil shot, I think this ability sucks big butt unless you're using wave shot, because wave shot drastically increases the damage, but it uses a mechanic called repulsive force. How do you get repulsive force? All you have to do is use a movement ability to get 1 stack of it, and that counts as your defensive ability for a dodge. Nimble Leap also counts as a movement ability, and so does Selfless Diffusion. All these movement abilities give you a stack of the repulsive force, and it consumes all 3 stacks to deal 700% base damage and a 90% chance to push people back. You really need wave shot if you're going to be using recoil shot to begin with. Multi-shot, I'm not the biggest fan of it anymore, though I did like it early on. The only one that's good is collision shot, as it guarantees a pushback, mainly only used in PvP. Selfless Diffusion is great, and I do recommend you get the health concentration recovery, as this will give you a little bit of health recovery and allows you to avoid burst. And what do I mean by that? If you press this and somebody does a burst ability on you, or a boss, and you take 400 damage in that time frame, for 1 second you actually recover the damage received, so you kind of like, it's almost like an iframe that you heal off of. And this also gives you more distance on your mobility skills. It only lasts a second, so you kind of have to be quick, but it gives you 25% more distance. So if you pop this and then you pop your Nimble Leap, which you're going to, because this will increase your double attack chance, and then Nimble Leap, if you're using the right passives from my build guides, will give you 20% more damage for using a movement ability. That allows you to dodge further, plus you get movement speed, plus you get all the range, magic, and melee evasion. All honestly probably a must-need skill in my personal opinion. The reduce aggro not needed because you have tanks in the game that will take aggro from you to begin with, and the remove CC is currently bugged to my knowledge, so I wouldn't spec into it right now. I did a lot of testing with friends. If I have the skill active, it doesn't remove anything. If I'm already binded, I can't even cast it. So if somebody in the comments knows if this is broken or not, let me know. Mother Nature's Protest. Now this one is kind of a personal choice. You could read the description of all the arrows right here, and that's just based on what you pick here. Now lightning is going to be the most amount of damage, but it's also the most mana heavy one. But if you want to do more damage, it doesn't really matter all that much because we have mana exchange, and you're going to want skill enhance effect. All it really does is double everything. Double the amount of health it takes from you, doubles the cooldown, and it doubles the overall amount of mana you do receive. You could also do recover stamina if you have the extra points, but I just use this to keep my mana upkeep, and you're going to need it when you're doing burst damage. Explosive Trap, the only one that's really worth your time is Shock Bomb. You could use setup range for, I guess, the quality of life, but Shock Bomb is the only thing that makes this skill worth anything in my opinion. Plus it does do some AoE damage, which this class severely lacks if you don't have your Annihilation Barrage Shot. Now traditionally, this is just normal Barrage Shot, but Annihilation allows you to spin in circles. If you've seen all the crossbow players, when they spin in circles, spin to win, this is the ability right here. Now Gale will stack every time you hit, and once it hits 10 stacks, it will explode doing AoE damage. And since you're spinning doing 16 attacks, you're going to be doing a whole lot of stuff. Now the number of attacks can be increased up to 24 times each based on the consecutive hits, so you could proc that a whole lot when it comes to Gale. That means you could proc Gale guaranteed 2 times for just activating Annihilation Barrage Shot, which increases your damage tenfold. Now weak point shot is something I would only say use if you're going for a crit weaken build, and to be honest, this is something you're probably going to see in higher level PvE because it gives all party members more critical hit damage. And when it comes to these, just go based on what you're doing. There's no really right or wrong answer with weak point. Then finally, Wind Snatcher. Now Wind Snatcher, I might get a little bit of flack for this, but I think both of these are not that good. You get the stamina decrease, but it's not worth 7 points in my opinion, and damage transfer, if it transfers to another target, that's really whatever. The thing about Wind Snatcher is when you activate Wind Snatcher, you get a bunch of attack speed, a bunch of movement speed, and you're basically taking that away from the other player. And overall, it's really not that bad of a skill once you get it leveled up, because it definitely wins you some fights. Because you could actually guarantee it by Shadow Striking first to get them bind and then do Wind Snatcher, and it'll guarantee the proc. But other than that, that's really what they're doing there. And just to wrap it up here, the main passives, just in case people don't want to go watch a whole nother video just for the passives, the main ones that are going to be doing the most amount of damage is Nature's Power. Using a mobility or movement skill increases your bonus damage by 20 and skill damage for 3 seconds. Another one is Bullseye, basically stacking up critical damage and skill damage boost based on the amount of times you attack a target, which you're going to be doing a lot with many different skills like Rapid Fire or Barrage Shot. And then finally, Piercing Strike. This just gives you a flat out bonus damage, which is actually, it looks very simple, it looks very plain, but I've learned this does a lot more than what meets the eye. This is absolutely insane when it comes to your crossbow and overall damage increases. And the last passive in this build that is a huge DPS increase is going to be your Destructive Fang. When you attack a target that has a poison proc, they have an 80% chance to reduce their defenses for magic, melee, and ranged, and the higher you level this up, the less defenses they have, meaning the more damage you deal. But as a complete guide, guys, I just wanted to cover all the skill specializations, all of the weapon masteries, and explain everything when it comes to the skills on this build, which ones to avoid, which ones that are not too great, and you guys could hopefully make the decision yourselves and explore more build options. If you did enjoy today's video, it would mean a lot if you hit the like button down below, as it does spread out my content to more people in the community. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on another video from me, guys. Stay safe, and I'll see you all later.